Coalition. 4 days ago in this room, a representative of the United Nations spoke about what he called the problem of unavoidable discrimination in Canada. He said specifically there exists a pattern in which marginalized groups, especially Indigenous people, find themselves on the wrong side of a toxic divide, subject to conditions that would not be acceptable anywhere else in Canada. And while the principle of non-discrimination is found in the Canadian Constitution, it does not serve to have protected those affected communities. And so what the rapporteur did was to say, we have to do something about those communities who are affected. And today we are going to be specifically talking and hearing from representatives of communities who are on the wrong side of that toxic divide, both from Manitoba, where they have lived with that toxic divide for well over half a century, and from Muskrat Falls, where the federal government has invested $9.2 billion in a project which is slated to poison the traditional country food web of all Indigenous people living downstream with a lethal neurotoxin called methyl mercury. In 2011, there was a joint federal-provincial panel looking at Muskrat Falls, despite the fact that Muskrat Falls had not received the free, prior, and informed consent of all Indigenous nations and all Indigenous peoples affected. This project continued to barrel along. The joint federal panel found that to prevent methyl mercury poisoning, the reservoir area of the dam had to be fully cleared of all trees, of all brush, of all foliage, of all topsoil to prevent methyl mercury poisoning. That was 2011. The federal government deferred to the province ignored that recommendation. In 2016, a report was produced by Harvard University, a 4-year peer-reviewed study which found a real crisis enveloping Muskrat Falls unless immediate action was taken in 2016. At that time, they found that methyl mercury levels could rise by as high as 1,500% in communities such as Rigolet downstream from Muskrat Falls. In 2016, there were large protests which led to a meeting with the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador and a promise that they would start looking at this issue of methyl mercury poisoning, and yet almost 3 years later, no action has been taken. The problem is not just with the provincial government, the problem is with the federal government, which is the single largest investor in this project, because they are not insisting that environmental standards should apply to the Indigenous people who live downstream, nor are they insisting that human rights standards, including free, prior, and informed consent from the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, that too has not applied. And that was also a finding of the UN Special Rapporteur. In 2017, Environment Minister Catherine McKenna signed something called the Minamata Convention on Mercury, and that committed Canada legally, a legally binding treaty to prevent the releases of mercury and other mercury-related toxins into the environment. And at that time, Catherine McKenna said, quote, "Our government is unwavering in its commitment to safeguard the environment and the health of Canadians from the effects of mercury. We are not seeing that safeguarding taking place on the other side of the toxic divide at Muskrat Falls in Labrador." So finally, I just want to let you know that the UN Rapporteur said the following on Thursday, quote, "I urge the federal government to use its leverage as the largest single investor in the project to review A, whether or not the UNDRIP principle of free, prior, and informed consent was properly applied to this project, and B, to prevent the release of methyl mercury. This dam is slated to go online in the fall of 2019 with that methyl mercury coming. No action has happened. So today, we are going to be demonstrating at 2 locations, at 10 a.m. at the Shaw Centre, outside of the International Coalition of Large Dams, where we hope to meet with the dam builders who are responsible for Muskrat Falls, for Site C, for Kiosk, and other dams which are creating a toxic nightmare for Indigenous peoples. We will return to Parliament Hill with this petition to stop the methyl mercury poisoning of Indigenous people downstream of Muskrat Falls. We will seek out a meeting with Catherine McKenna, who has been avoiding us for the last 15 months, as has Justin Trudeau, on this critical issue. If you want reconciliation, you don't get it by means of committing further acts of cultural genocide. I'm now going to introduce Amy Norman, and Aaron Saunders, who have spent 23 hours in a car to get here from Labrador. Amy and Aaron.
My name is Amy Norman. I'm an Inuk woman born and raised in Happy Valley Goose Bay, Labrador, which is about 30 kilometers downstream of the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project. As Matthew mentioned, methylmercury is a huge concern for us. And it's especially insidious to us as Inuit because of how methylmercury as a biotoxin works. Basically, it bioaccumulates in fat and it works its way up the food web. So it starts in the vegetation, and all vegetation has some amount of mercury, but when it is submerged in water, that's when it methylizes and becomes dangerous. And that submerged vegetation, as it becomes methylmercury, and the plankton eat it, and then the fish eat the plankton, and the seals eat the fish, and we eat the seals, and it all bioaccumulates in the fat like that. It's painful because as Inuit, we are seal people. That's who we are. That's our culture. You know, we live off the land. We hunt seal, we eat seal, we wear seal, like I am today. So it's just so scary and devastating to have, you know, this wealth of information about all the negative impacts of methylmercury, and for the federal government to have said in 2011 that the reservoir should be cleared to prevent this. And yet here we are 8 years later and it still hasn't been done.
My name is Erin Saunders. I'm an Inuit woman from Happy Valley Goose Bay, also a Labrador land protector. My rights as an Indigenous woman is being taken away. My Aboriginal lifestyle is being oppressed. Everything is at stake with this project. I live off the land every summer. I eat salmon, fish, I eat seal. I do that every summer. I have my whole life. That's who we are as Labrador people. Our methylmercury concerns are being completely ignored by Nalcor and the Newfoundland government. And, you know, we're tired of this and we want to be heard, and we're putting our concerns out there.
And it's not only the methylmercury contamination that we're worried about with the Muskrat Falls hydroelectric project. The dam itself is built on what's called quick clay or marine clay. This is, the sand, the type of sediment that it is, it can wash away and liquefy with any amount of agitation and pressure. And that's what Nalcor, the proponent that's building the dam, that's what they're using as part of their dam wall. So you have this massive reservoir that they hope to fill to 39 meters, and part of it that's being held back is this quick clay that can just literally wash away at any second. It's terrifying to live downstream from that. You know, I've seen my elders cry. I know people who sleep with life jackets under their beds. The standards of safety are not being met. This is a public safety concern. This is a public health concern. And this is just one example, you know, in our backyard. But as you will hear from the folks from Manitoba and other folks from not just Canada and Site C, but around the world, you know, these issues echo because of how dam builders and provincial governments and federal governments don't take the time, and they continually ignore Indigenous peoples.
Also, I would like to say that we've been trying to ask for an independent review study of the North Spur, and that's been totally ignored too as well.
Hello, my name is Carol Kablisky, and I'm from the Sichuayas Cree Nation, also known as Nelson House. I am a partner with Manitoba Hydro. We own 33% of the Musqueam Dam, and I just want to just to share that we are here to support Muskrat Falls with their stand with Manitoba Hydro and any kind of hydro. But anyways, I want to talk about a little bit about the impacts that we're going through in our community, the social and economic problems that we're having, even though they told us that being a partner was going to be, you know, all great and that we were going to prosper. Well, that ain't happening. The social problems that we're facing is drugs and alcohol in our community, unemployment, yes, we are establishing some businesses in our community, but at the cost of getting a loan from Manitoba Hydro at a rate of 36% interest rate attached to it for every loan that we get to start a business in our community, which I feel, and I'm very afraid of the future of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and the next generation to come, because from the way things are going, I have a fear that Manitoba Hydro is going to come back and say, well, your leader signed off on this, and you voted on this, and you can't pay back that loan, so we're going to take it back. That's what I fear for the future of my community, and it's just an ongoing lies from the federal government and Manitoba Hydro, and we're surrounded by many dams up in the north, like all around us. We're surrounded by many dams, and we're all connected. We are all connected to the rivers and the streams, and we're all impacted in the same way up north. Every community, we're all facing the same problems, and yet they say you're going to prosper, you're going to have this and have that. Well, that ain't happening, and you people need to come out and see this for yourselves. It's all lies. So, and with that, even with the murdered and missing Indigenous women, even that's a part of all of this whole process with the hydro dams as well. And I'd just like to thank this group of people that we're supporting, and for allowing us to come here and be here and to speak on behalf of Manitoba Hydro. But something has to be done with the way Hydro conducts their business with First Nations people. They talk about partnerships. Well, there's partnerships, yes, but there's no relationships.
Hi, my name is Rita Munias. I'm from Temichikamak, in Cross Lake, Manitoba. We heard these people crying out for help, and then we came all the way over here to come and support their need of awareness of what is going on with hydro developments. Hydro developments do not give any hope for our people. Our people in Pimichikamak have been suffering through hydro developments that erosion and deteriorating the water systems, and there are dangers in there. People die while they're practicing their traditional pursuits, and people die from diabetes, amputations, heart problems. The heart conditions of our people deteriorated, like really went down when the sturgeon were they're at extinction, close to extinction. So more heart problems are encountered by our people. And when I heard about the grassy narrows who are suffering from methyl mercury poisoning, you know, it hurt when I was standing with children holding a sign up saying, "I am mercury poisoned." And when I saw that, when I was standing with them at Parliament Hills here, I thought to myself, we will have to help these people get their story out. The awareness of how much devastation there is with hydro developments. Our people today are suffering from cancer. Northern Manitoba recently had cancer victims, one after another, in my own community in Pimichikamak. One death after another. Manitoba Hydro and other people, federal government say, well, there's cancer all over. But I say no. I know it is all over, but no, nobody dies every week from cancer. And that's what's happening in our community. So I say to the people that there should be an independent study done on mercury and the soil testing, environmental testing, and independent study to be done. Because I know there is policy in the federal system, the provincial system, and the corporate system that will not tell what is really going on with our water and the poisoning of our water and earth even. So with that, you know, we are more than concerned. People around the world should know about this, and this is our outcry. And we have friends who want to create awareness of how much devastation there is on people. This is like cultural genocide, killing the people, killing the people's survival. We don't have much economy on our traditional pursuits like hunting, fishing, trapping. We don't have that much because our land has been destroyed and eroded into the river system. That makes mercury poisoning and other types of metal poisoning. So with that, we are going to stand by the people of Muskrat Falls and other dams that will ever be coming our way, because we have to tell the story to the people who need to hear it.
I just want to say one more thing is that with every First Nation that has a dam behind their backyard, we've all been impacted in the same way. We've been uprooted, we've been displaced, and our way of life has been destroyed. And we have to live with what we have. And it's very saddening that our generation, this generation doesn't understand or doesn't know what has happened from the past. And it is genocide. Every First Nation that's been affected by dams, everything, it's genocide. And the government needs to know that. What they've done to First Nations right across Canada is that it's impacted our way of life. And it's destroyed our land, it's destroyed our rivers, our waters, our lakes, our trees, our animals that we live off of. It's all being destroyed. And for what? For the mighty dollar. And that shouldn't be happening. Thank you.
My name is Meg Sheehan. I'm an environmental lawyer that drove up here from New Hampshire. I'm with the Northeast Mega Dam Resistance Alliance. We're here to lend our voices to the people that you've just heard from and all across Canada and the world who are opposing mega dams and the cultural, economic, and environmental destruction. There are 7 transmission corridors slated for the region of New England that I live in, Maine, New York, and New Hampshire. We will fight those transmission corridors to prevent this dirty energy from Canadian Hydro from reaching our electrical use. We will no longer be complicit in the cultural genocide that goes along with Canadian Hydro. We'll no longer be complicit with causing extinction and biodiversity destruction, or with the continued destruction of our rivers. We'll no longer be complicit in the greenwashing of this dirty energy. For example, 10 years ago, when Hydro-Quebec dammed the Rupert River for its East Main hydro facility, flooding 175 square miles of virgin forest, it released as much CO2 into the atmosphere as a coal plant operating for 1 year to generate the same amount of electricity. Yet Hydro-Quebec promotes this electricity as carbon-free and green. We're fighting the energy policies both in Massachusetts and across New England, as well as across the United States, that provide taxpayer and ratepayer incentives for this dirty energy. We call on the Canadian government to stop all of these dams that you've just heard about. This is unjust, it's a climate disaster, and it is not a solution to the climate crisis. Africa has its blood diamonds. Canada has its blood megawatts. and we will no longer be complicit in promoting that type of electricity in the United States.
Happy to take any questions that the media might have. Yes.
I've got one. The Justin Brake with APTN. The Innu Nation in Labrador put out a press release this morning. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but they're challenging the special rapporteur's findings. They're saying that, for one, the special rapporteur from the UN didn't actually speak with either of the Innu First Nations in Labrador when they were conducting their visit last week. And then they also draw attention to the Independent Expert Advisory Committee, which was formed to review the methylmercury issue, where there wasn't a complete consensus among the scientists on the methylmercury issue. So I'm wondering if anybody up there can address this. I know, Amy, you've followed this stuff really closely, so maybe you can sort of clarify like what the scientists have, like where the discrepancy is, and you know, whether it's clear based on the information out there, if the Harvard study, you know, seems to contradict with some of what the Independent Expert Advisory Committee scientists have come up with.
And I will preface this by saying, you know, I have the utmost respect for the Innu Nation, and you know, I've lived peacefully as neighbors with the Innu Nation my whole life. That being said, I do think they are in the wrong on this one. To the first part of the question, where they, you know, spoke on not meeting with the special rapporteur on toxins. The special rapporteur on toxins had a public call out to submit. You know, he called out for submissions on toxins, and if they wanted to speak with him, they should have, you know, submitted a document like we have. You know, these are public figures who put out these press releases, and if, you know, they are concerned and wanted to speak with him, they should have done that and followed the same route that we did. The second part of your question on the Independent Expert Advisory Committee, the lack of consensus was not with the scientists, because those committees, they were kind of like two parts. There were the scientists who looked at the data, they came up with the recommendations, and then there were the voting members. And it was the voting members that didn't have the consensus on the methylmercury, you know, recommendations. And the only voting member to vote against the capping of the wetlands and the removal of the topsoil was the Innu Nation. So the only reason that there's no consensus is because of them. So to bring that up is, in my mind, irrelevant, because the scientists agreed, and all of the other members on that, the voting members of that committee agreed. So it's really just them saying no. You know, they're not the only Indigenous peoples in Labrador, and they need to respect us and our voices, saying that we're affected downstream too. Thank you.
And I'd also like to add to the president of the Innu Nation, I was arrested with you in 1988 and in 1989 and in 1990 as we worked together to stop a NATO base going on to Happy Valley, Goose Bay, Labrador, and I do respect you as a person. We have been in jail together. I have been in jail with the leader of the Innu Nation's mother, Elizabeth Panashaway, who is absolutely, unalterably, 100% opposed to the Muskrat Falls megadam. So we see, with the greatest of respect, that there are leaders of certain communities, and the folks from Manitoba can certainly address this, who will make a statement, but that doesn't necessarily reflect all of the community's opinion. There are many people within the Innu Nation who are concerned. There are currently members of Innu Nation who are on trial in the Supreme Court of Newfoundland and Labrador simply for being on their own land. So what we would like to do with Innu Nation is to continue a dialogue and say, let's sit down and look at that science. We appreciate that you are invested in the Muskrat Falls megadam, but do you not see what is coming down the pipe as soon as this dam goes live in the fall of 2019? I'm just wondering, Carol, would you mind speaking to how that works in Manitoba in terms of the divide in the community between leadership and community members?
Well, in my community, when the project was introduced to my community to become partners, it was very, the consultation process wasn't very fair, and it wasn't open. Our people were divided by this because we lived off the land, and this was something new to us, and it was hard, especially when we were affected by the Churchill River diversion already, where the hydro just went ahead and did what they did without any proper documents or proper license. And then we had to live with that all these years. And then all of a sudden being introduced to a squatum again. So my community lives in between two dams. And then we have Kiosk. That's not too far from us as well. So we're surrounded by dams. And it's really hard on our people right now because, you know, like I said, we've been impacted by so many things in my community because of this project. And other communities as well. The same stories, like the same stories from Muskrat. It's the same thing all right across Canada. And this has to stop. I also mentioned about the mercury yesterday, that the last time I remember, I think I was like 10 years old when they were doing mercury testing on the whole community and they were cutting our hair. They haven't done that, and it's over 40 years. So that's something that I'd like to see change, where there's some kind of study being done on every First Nation that has a dam in their backyard. So that's something that I'd like to see happen. And the other thing is, you know, our communities in northern Manitoba, we have dams in our backyard, but you should see our hydro bills. It's ridiculous. Some are $1,500 to $1,200 a month. This is not right. And yet they're selling cheap hydro to the States. This is not right. And yet they expect us to go on our own. And how can we when we're going so far into debt?
Yeah, with all these projects that we have in northern Manitoba, we have difficulty with our people as well because of settlements that were offered to us. The Michigamak Nation was the only one out of the 5 communities who didn't go into these settlements, but we do have a lot of divide with the communities. And as Carol mentioned, you know, you can, once you have an agreement, you can get another agreement upon it. So with that, we have to make our story known that the federal government, the provincial government, and the corporations, in our case Manitoba Hydro, certainly makes a lot of divide within the communities of northern Manitoba. And yet they say we're helping the people. I don't think they're helping the people. I think they're dividing them and putting them down, putting us down as indigenous people who were caring, sharing, loving, and respecting every person that ever came around us. So that as well is a social problem created by corporations, federal government, and the province because of policy. And our people do not live in policy. Our people live with love, respect, honor, truth. And part of that is gone down, a part of it. But there are certain people who still live this for the love of the world, earth. We need earth. We need Mother Earth. I don't know how government officials can live on knowing that their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and generations to come will need land and will need water to survive.
I just want to share one more thing. With the man camps that are in our communities with the Squatter Project and the Kiosk Project, it's become a problem, a big problem, and it's been mentioned before about the murdered missing women in Manitoba, and you know it's really sad what's happening in these camps because I've worked in one of them, and the division I saw there amongst our own people, and the workers from all over the world. You could see it when you walk into a dining room. Half the section would be the workers from all around the world, and then the other half was the First Nations. And that was sad because, you know, Hydro talks about a partnership, and yet our people, the employees are all divided when they're at these camps, and that's really sad because they talk about employment and that First Nations have first priority. That ain't so. It's been a lie for every dam that's been going up. It's just been a lie. And these same group of companies go from mega dams to mega dams. Same people, same workers, same employees, and with every First Nation, they're given labor work, not the high-paying jobs, and this is this is sad.
No more questions?
I have one more actually. I know that Nalcor, so it's Muskrat Falls related again, and I know that Nalcor Energy has said that the flooding, the final stage, the biggest stage of the flooding is going to happen this summer. And the provincial government hasn't said one way or another what it's going to do with the independent advisory committee's recommendations, including clearing the reservoir prior to flooding. What have you heard on the ground in Labrador? Has there been any discussion from any public officials or anyone else about what's going on, and how do you feel about that the flooding may be imminent? Or that's to either one of you.
Yeah, so I mean, on the ground, hearing absolutely nothing in terms of actions taken by the province on the recommendations from the Independent Expert Advisory Committee. You know, it has been recommended to clear the reservoir, and 3 out of 4 voting members voted to also cap the wetlands and remove the topsoil. And it's not being done, and it's been, you know, 3 years since the provincial government put together, or, you know, committed to this committee, and there's absolutely no action. And it's hard to express just how devastating that is, because that's who we are, that's our culture, and they're choosing to ignore, you know, our way of life. They're choosing to ignore Indigenous knowledge. They're choosing to ignore, you know, really reputable Western knowledge and scientists from Harvard and all kinds of people. And I don't understand why they won't just clear the reservoir. It's a simple solution, and so many people have said it time and time again, starting in 2011 with the Joint Review Panel, and then we had to have another committee to say it, and they're still not doing anything.
It just keeps dragging on and dragging on. Yeah, it's like they're not doing anything. They're just completely ignoring our concerns. I know that as a land protector myself. Yes. I also want to say, whatever the Indian Nation say, they're not the only Indigenous people in Labrador. There's Inuit as well that live off marine life, and you know, we're all concerned also about the Muskrat. We have a lot of concerns there with the marine plague.
Thank you. So just a reminder that we are heading over to the Shaw Center for 10 a.m. where there will be a protest at the International Coalition of Large Dams. We are hoping to hand out information to delegates to let them know about this ugly side of their work, this human rights violating side of their work. And we should be back here on the Hill around the noon hour to try and get into Parliament and present this petition to Catherine McKenna with the 15,000 signatures demanding that the federal government intervene as the largest single investor in Muskrat Falls and actually make sure that that reservoir clearance takes place at the very least. That's the very least that needs to be done. And also, the government needs to sit down with all Indigenous peoples affected, not just one nation, and seek their free, prior, and informed consent before this thing goes online, and respect the fact that if most do not want it, or there is a consensus not to go ahead with Muskrat Falls, you stop the project, because the damage that's coming down the pipe is going to be irreversible. So thank you again for being here.